What is behind all the high strangeness experienced in and around Skinwalker Ranch in the Uintah Basin? On a regular basis, strange craft and lights are reported in the sky. Many accounts of strange cryptids are reported, to include Bigfoot, Dogmen and Shapeshifter type creatures, strange orbs, unexplained cattle mutilations, and even poltergeist type activity has been reported. In the mid-90s, the Sherman family bought and ran a cattle ranch on the property, but after only a few short years, they moved out and sold the property, reportedly due to the unexplained mutilation of their cattle, the mysterious death of their dogs, and other strange paranormal activity. Is it due to the Navajo curse placed on the Utes and on the land many years ago? Is it due to some sort of paranormal vortex that exists in the area? Or is it an area where there is a strong extraterrestrial presence? Or perhaps it is a combination of these. Ryan Burns has been investigating the area for over a decade and joins me to discuss his experience with some of the high strangeness that occurs in and around Skinwalker Ranch. Well, greetings and welcome once again to Passion for the Paranormal, bringing a passion for the paranormal to you. I'm your host, Curry Stegan, and it's so exciting to be with you here in the new year, running headlong right into 2020 with some great shows. Tonight, I'm covering a topic that I've wanted to cover for a long time on the show, and that is the topic of Skinwalker Ranch and the mystery around Skinwalker Ranch and the surrounding Uintah Basin. I've got Ryan Burns joining me on the show tonight, and Ryan has over a decade's worth of experience exploring and investigating in and around Skinwalker Ranch in the Uintah Basin, and he's now got 3 books to his credit. And really documenting his experiences in this area. So great to have Ryan joining me on the show. If you haven't been over to the Facebook page yet, please head over to facebook.com/passion, the number 4 the paranormal, and like and follow us there. You can also pay us a visit on our website at passion, the number 4 the paranormal.com, and there you can catch up with past episodes. You can access some great Passion for the Paranormal merchandise. You can purchase hoodies, t-shirts, coffee mugs with the great Passion for the Paranormal professional artwork on them. And that goes to help supporting the show. And they're also great products. So hope you'll go over there and pay that link a visit. And if you have an iTunes account, if you are an Apple user, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and rate and review the show. That really helps to move the show forward. It helps others to find the show and help us to push the show forward. So we'll hope you'll do that. And, we're on just about any podcast app out there. And so there's many ways to access past episodes of the show. And if you know of a friend, family member, or coworker who you think would like to tune into the show, please share a link with them. That's a powerful way to share information about the show. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into this discussion with Ryan. Should be a real amazing one. I'm so fascinated by this area, and it's really not far from where I live, just a couple of hours from where I live in northern Utah, so really hope I can even get out there and visit the area at some point. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get into discussion. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Okay, so my guest tonight is Ryan Burns, and Ryan is an author, paranormal researcher, lecturer, consultant, paranormal property collector, and host of the Hero Paranormal podcast. He is also author of 3 books to include Skinwalker and Beyond, the Utah UFO Ranch, and Shapeshifter Territory. He is joining me tonight to talk about mysterious activity he has researched and witnessed while investigating near the infamous Skinwalker Ranch in the Uintah Basin. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, Curry.
This is exciting stuff. I mean, this is practically my backyard as well. I'm in Ogden, Utah. Still have not been out to the near the ranch. I know you can't visit the ranch itself. It's private property. There's no trespassing. I'm curious to know, do you know anything about the new owner who bought the property from Mr. Bigelow? Are you in touch with him? Have you reached out to him?
Yes. What I can tell you is he, at the moment, does not want to be known. And in the future, the upcoming future, he will be known. He will actually make himself be known. That's all I know.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I know, Mr. Bigelow had sold the property to another private owner. Yeah, you just don't really hear much about it. But Ryan, maybe you could take us back to how this journey all started for you. One, how you got started in the paranormal and in researching the high strangeness that is Skinwalker Ranch and the surrounding areas of the Uintah Basin.
Yeah, I had a interesting experience that involved literally picking up a hitchhiker who I believed was an elderly Native American coming down off a rocky bluff. And this was on what used to just be the ranch road, it was a county road that went from one side to the other, from Independence to Fort Duchesne. And but then it got blocked later on. The elderly Native American just kind of climbed in the car when I stopped, and trying to be a good Samaritan, I basically ended up losing some time and being found, being questioned, being asked what happened. And when I told them, and this was Bureau of Indian Affairs officers, they basically just said, "Oh, you got nabbed by the Skinwalker." And that was the first time that I had heard that term. And that kind of stuck in my mind.
Wow, that's interesting. Now you were working as a fly fishing guide, and so this kind of happened by accident. It sounded like really all of this kind of you stumbled on by accident. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was nothing that was planned. Correct. It was just kind of a random. I was looking for places to fish, and I had just got some food there in Fort Duchesne, and I'd been doing this for the entire week. I had an injury at the time, and I couldn't work, which is grueling for a fly fishing guide. You just want to get a line wet, and so that's what I did, and that's where I ended up. And it wasn't only, 3 to 5 years later that I heard the name Skinwalker Ranch, became interested, and then realized it was the same place.
Wow. And what a strange what a strange number of accounts and of activity that's been reported there. Now we've had Mr. Robert Bigelow and his firm and some PhD level researchers there researching the property. Now I think you said in the book you've had experiences well outside of the actual property itself, but I'm just kind of curious. What is your take on what those researchers experienced there at Skinwalker, and what did you kind of take away from all their research done there?
It is one of those enigmas that the more you find out, the more information you find out, the bigger the puzzle becomes. If you come into it looking for an answer, you'll be blown away, because it just does not want to offer one that is, what fits in our simple mind as a particular entity. But the enigma of all the phenomena and the different types of phenomena, it is an intergalactic port of sorts, or interdimensional is a better explanation. And it's difficult because there's multiple highly advanced entities or intelligences that can be present at any given time. And that's just part of the scenario.
Now, isn't it true that these researchers, a lot of them walked away scratching their head? It seemed from what I remember from the Jeremy Corbell film, it seemed like they all kind of walked away scratching their heads and really didn't get a lot of answers, other than to say there's a lot of high strangeness going on there. And you mentioned intelligent. It seems to be very intelligent, whatever it was. And I think one of the lines used in that film was, "It seems to be one step ahead of us at all times."
Yeah, good point, Curry. It's been described as a precognitive sentient intelligence, which means that it is omnipotent. It can know what you are thinking before you think it. However, it's not omnipotent. And we've been doing research with it's a trickster of sorts, and it is, as the ancient ones called it, or it is known as the ancient ones, depending on which tribe or cultural organization you're speaking to. But the Hopi and the Ute and the Navajo all consider this just something that exists, and it, from our realm, our scientists, and when I say our, I mean usually the private sector, or like you mentioned, people like Bigelow who are retaining scientists and doing this in the area. And what's being found is a decent description is alien artificial intelligence. However, that can check a lot of boxes, and many ancient cultures also considered these gods with a small g. So kind of like, as I said, they're precognitive, but they're not omnipotent. They have many powers, but they are not all-encompassing. And it's a very interesting entity, or intelligence, or intelligences, because it can be, like I said, multiple entities in a given place at a given time. But yeah, it's a very interesting, and it just could be whatever mask tends to be worn by this force or source.
Now, I wanted to get into, because I think you know the history here as well, and you're kind of tied in with some of the Native American population in the area. What's the history here from the Native American standpoint? I mean, there's talks of the Navajos cursing the land as they were warring with the Utes. Can you just kind of touch on that a little bit, because I think that's an interesting aspect to all of this.
Sure, it is. It's an unfortunate scenario, but very, very typical of the time. There was some dealings where the Navajo in the San Luis Valley, which coincidentally is extremely similar as far as high strangeness. However, the Navajo in that particular region of Colorado and New Mexico were, quote unquote, sold out, in their words, by the Ute for a quote unquote deal at the moment to probably buy themselves time. And you got to realize the scenario here. There was a lot going on, and the Navajo and the Ute had some bad history as well from other scenarios and situations which had taken place. So this added to it, and it was pretty much the end for them at that location. And they cursed the Ute with the curse of the Skinwalker. And to make that kind of a curse known publicly is a pretty big deal. That is, in occult terms, that would be, going all the way. And it's not an entity that is to be toyed with.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing about this is, so you've got that Native American Skinwalker curse that's been talked about. You've got strange lights and craft in the air that are being sighted on a regular basis. And so it kind of makes you scratch your head as you read about this. Now, I haven't experienced it. You've firsthand experienced it as an investigator. But it makes you wonder what the heck is the connection here between, this possible Skinwalker type being or entity, the UFO craft that are being witnessed or being seen or spotted in the area. What's your take on that connection?
There's so much high level either magic or technology taking place, and in some terms they're similar. I believe it was Arthur C. Clarke that said any technology that is out of our reach is basically going to appear as magic, and that goes for anyone. And that I didn't say that correctly, but more or less that's the idea. And it is it's definitely an occult tradition. The witchery way is something that is a small micro percentage of the population that would even, be practicing this at any given time. But yeah, quite the curse to place in a location that already has heightened geomagnetic features, and then throw in a huge electromagnetic field with the Utah Water Project hydroelectric massive substructure coming through. The lines are just huge, as you'd expect, coming from dams like Flaming Gorge Dam and others. And it kind of charges this porous sandstone ridge that has Bottle Hollow, which is a man-made reservoir where the Buffalo soldiers used to toss their bottles in on the way to Roosevelt or Fort Mighton to get either a drink or a woman. And this was just the lay of the land. And now it is interesting that we mentioned the Buffalo soldiers, because they also cursed the Native Americans as the Ute were cursing the Prince Hall Mason Buffalo soldiers that were holding them captive there at Fort Duchesne. So there was all kinds of voodoo and hoodoo and occult dark arts being thrown across the landscape, which was already charged. Previous people that had come through there, such as Father Dominguez and Escalante, while they were mapping routes, for lack of a better word, most likely gold trails for the Spanish, and just mapping it for all mankind that were coming through, and they were noticing things in 1776 as far as flying saucers and strange anomalies and paranormal activity. So all in their notes. So this is a strange place.
You mentioned that you've had some connection with the Native American residents of the area. What is their take on it? Are they afraid of crossing into that territory? Do they avoid it? How do they treat the area?
Very respectfully, and I'm glad you mentioned that. They are very respectful in a sense that, no, they're not afraid, but at the same time there's a protocol. And as long as they adhere to that protocol of how the elders tell them to deal with these scenarios, everything is okay. And it's a very good way to look at things.
Now, when you talk about the Skinwalker as an entity, how do they view, and I imagine it might be a little different whether you're talking to someone with a Ute or Navajo background, but in general, do they consider this a malevolent entity? What do they think of this entity, some call the Skinwalker?
It's a negative force, a dark power that can be accessed by those who have the knowledge or the tradition or know the steps to engage in this kind of occult ritual magic. And it is, for lack of a better word, usually very deceptive. Yet it is in no way, shape, or form possible that it is only human. There's definitely some entity involved or paranormal activity taking place for this type of a display to be witnessed.
Now, Ryan, you've been investigating the area for quite some time now. How long have you actually been actively visiting and investigating around Skinwalker Ranch in the Uintah Basin?
Since 2007. And It has eased off a bit in 2014 as I made Vegas slowly my home for family reasons and other things. And but I still visit it monthly, and I have the entire time, if not bi-monthly. And it's one of those places that it's a magical location.
Yeah, and it's certainly a place that I think a lot of people are interested in visiting. However, you have that the property there that's off limits. It's private property. Now, are there places close by that are easy to visit where you may be able to perhaps get a view into the property itself?
No, it is, well, yes. There's multiple locations where you could actually legitimately park and just see the property, but it's awkward, and there's all kinds of traffic, whether it be Bureau of Indian Affairs, oil company traffic, typical law enforcement, and all kinds of different, agricultural traffic. So it would be awkward. You'd be in an awkward position pretty quickly, no matter what, even though it is very desolate. So I don't know if that helps. And then most property owners are aware of what's going on, and if they see suspicious activity, they usually call it in.
So are there other places, I know you mentioned in the book that there's other places you go. Do you take visitors sometimes, or is it mainly just other investigators, seasoned investigators that you take with you?
No, I don't take other people or tours or anything of that nature. Depending on where the research is going and what direction we are, sometimes you need other people, and those other individuals are usually necessary for whatever type of research you're trying to accomplish.
So the other question I want to ask, because we already kind of touched on this just a little bit, but from all your years of research now, it sounds like over 12 years, and you probably have not reached any firm conclusions here, but what are you leaning towards? Do you think this is a paranormal flap, like some people like to call it, or vortex, or is this primarily related to the curse, or do you think it's a combination of both?
I like that you use the word flap, because people don't use that word very often anymore. And that is just an area where things aren't quite right. And that's for sure. It is, things are interdimensionally traveling through areas that, for whatever reason, are conducive to their behavior. And it's too difficult to, as you said, try to name what this is. There's many names for it. We all agree that it is very interested in contact, very interested in trickster behavior, and it prefers certain areas to others.
Interesting. Now, based on your research, is there any other place in the world where you would draw similarities, or where you think similar activity may be going on, or is this place really, unique in the kind of activity and the heightened level of activity experienced there?
I think there's probably many places in the world that, and not, I'm not saying that they're everywhere, but it is possible that it could take place anywhere, this type of scenario, but it prefers locations where, for whatever reason, it's more conducive, or the veil is thin. And I don't know what exactly makes that happen. This location is near the 37th parallel. There's chemicals found in the earth that are found nowhere else on the planet, such as gilsonite. There's interesting history, and there's also occult history that isn't spoken of. All kinds of strange things. But the reality is, it has definitely become a playground for whatever this entity is, or at least a place where it can freely roam. You know, without knowing what it is, I think it's kind of important to kind of keep it that way. Like, we don't want to mess with something that we really don't know what it is. And yeah, there's all kinds of government studies and analysis, you know, threat analysis and things of that nature. I can't get into any of that, but there's something happening in the area that is not typical.
Yeah, it certainly does seem to be the perfect storm, if you will, for this kind of activity based on some of the stuff you already mentioned. And one place that I'm familiar with, I had Stan Gordon on the show. He's a paranormal researcher. Last year he was on the show talking about another very strange place. I don't know if you're familiar with it, in Pennsylvania, referred to as Chestnut Ridge. Now, the reason why I bring up this location is there does seem to be some similarities here. A lot of craft sighted, multiple counties around the same time frame, strange looking cryptid type creatures, and some were Bigfoot looking creatures, some were shot at with no effect. Even, you know, dog-like creatures, I know those have been mentioned and cited in and around the Skinwalker Ranch area. Also been reported at the Chestnut Ridge region. All kinds of strange going-ons and activity. Some of it going on around the same time frame. In other words, people seeing craft and then seeing Bigfoot-like creatures and other type of cryptids. And it just seems to be there may be some parallel here, although I'm not really familiar with all the history behind Chestnut Ridge, whether or not there's a Native American connection there. Have not been able to find that. But if there's one place that seems to have some similarities, it would be that one. Now, in all this time you've been visiting the area, have you heard much about, there's a lot of talk about these cattle mutilations, you know, strange craft and that sort of thing. Can you talk to that a little bit? And do you know if when these cattle mutilations have occurred, whether they've sighted craft and lights in the air around the same time frame?
I can tell you what I know, which is very limited. But it is interesting and intriguing because the first cattle mutilation took place that when, at least at the point where Mr. Bigelow and NIDS were involved, the first cattle mutilation actually took place at a neighboring property at Mr. Garcia's property. And then the cattle mutilations began on the old Sherman property. Now, Terry was convinced that this was military, or that it had to be. He was a very rational guy, you know, that he just happened to be, instead of the path of the Skinwalker, that he was just in the path of, you know, the military-industrial complex. And, you know, there's something to be said for that, just because it has gathered the attention of our government and forces that be, groups that would be interested in that type of thing. But whatever was being witnessed, yes, there were craft involved as far as proximity and sightings within proximity of times when mutilations would be found. But at the actual times of mutilation, nothing would be seen except the animal. So it's difficult. You can't say that a craft was involved. However, there's interesting correlations to other theories, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and in the book you talk about strange lights, and I think you refer to them as drones. There's an interesting story when you mentioned the Sherman, the couple that bought the property and was ranching on the property long before Robert Bigelow came to decide to buy the property after they had vacated it. There's a story about seeing, as I remember it, and I could be wrong on all the details here, but that they saw these strange lights, maybe orb-type lights off in the distance. Their dogs chased these things. I don't know if they actually sent their dogs out to investigate it. And then there's a story that both the dogs that chased these things were basically killed, and all that was left of them was just some sort of carcass. Can you touch on that? Or are you aware of that particular story?
Yeah, there's been a lot of people who have retold that story with different facts, different theories, analysis, things of that nature. But the actual truthful story, what actually happened, is very similar to what you said, Curry. It was a scenario where a similar light that was seen in the past was seen again. It was a blue light. These blue lights had, for lack of a better word, looked like Pyrex balls about the size of basketballs, or some were smaller. And it looked like Selsun blue shampoo fluid floating around inside, but yet iridescent, lit up. So really wild looking. I love the descriptions because, they just, Sherman's just described it as stuff they knew. Some Selsun blue inside of a Pyrex glass ball, lit up. You can kind of get the idea of what this may have looked like. And swirling around, this fluid, he said he could see it swirling around, which is very interesting. However, they'd seen him before. The dogs hated him. And this particular night, the dogs were in pursuit of these blue lights. And 3 of his favorite dogs followed it into the trees. And it was a playful yet tricksterish light. That's probably why the dogs hated it. It was kind of bouncing around and playing with them. But yeah, the dogs never came back. And the next morning, he went out and checked for them and noticed that there were 3 grease spots, which can only be described as possibly the dog's remains, and pretty tragic. The dogs are always the casualties. The issue with that is it seems possible why it's so obvious that dogs are the best biosensor that you can be using in an area. So if there's this type of activity, a dog will be alerted to this long before the average animal.
Kind of alarming and scary stuff to think that while it's fascinating and it's interesting, and you've been researching and investigating this area for quite some time, do you also go into it with the element of fear and perhaps think whenever you go out there and investigate these areas that it could mean that you could ultimately lose your life? I mean, do you have that fear when you go out there?
I never have. There's been some times when I've thought that when you're actually out there. But at the in-between and the planning stages and, getting prepared to re-enter that area and try to see if you see any interaction, sometimes there isn't. But it is it's definitely something that there's flashes here and there that there could be danger involved, but it's like anything. And I think if you approach it correctly, you're less likely to be injured.
So do you think that these entities feed off fear if you go into the location or locations where they may be present, that they may feed off of that kind of fear? I think there was something mentioned in the book along those lines.
Absolutely. I think there is an archonic nature to some of these entities as far as how they tend to react, engage, and interact and mimic emotions that are either heightened for whatever reason, let's say scared, fear, happiness, joy, tears, laughter. These highlight emotions where a lot of biochemical excretion is involved. They tend to feed off of those. And I'm not sure why.
Yeah, it's interesting, but as I said, it's kind of a little bit spooky and scary to think of as well. That there's some precognition behind this. You talk in the book a lot about your experiences, and you refer to them as drones, strange lights, colored lights, orb type lights that you've experienced out on your expeditions, your investigations. Can you talk a little bit more or touch a little bit more on your experiences with those and what you think they might be?
I can only describe what I saw. I don't know what they were. They did seem intelligent. They almost seemed as if when they were off, they could just relocate to another location and, again, light up the landscape and see if something was there. They were looking for something. I found out that something was me in some cases, or myself and other researchers. And I don't know, they seem to, I hate to call them a type of security, but they seem to be scanning in most cases. And although it's one of the most interesting phenomena I've seen, it's strange how they happen and then they don't for quite some time and then they happen again.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, have you had these things follow you as you're investigating?
What I mean by we is myself and another researcher did have these lights, and I, on one occasion, other occasion, had these lights follow us. And they did, in fact, find us. Long story short, they came up a very tough ridge line. If you're familiar with that area, that shapeshifter territory is just very rugged. And they came up faster than a human could. We knew we were dealing with something that wasn't human. And it located us. Its description, the best I can do, is 3 silver balls in the form of a triangle, yet not connected, about the size of about the size of large softballs. They hovered in the same formation and lit up and flashed. And it was very bright, the flash, when it flashed us. It must have only been 6 feet above our heads.
Wow. Yeah, the other thing that fascinates me here, intrigues me about the area and about some of the accounts you talked about, is there seems to be a lot of cryptid type sightings. And you seem to have experienced some of them yourself. Can you talk to, what the different kinds of cryptid sightings have been in and around that area? And maybe after that, maybe you could touch on some of your experiences.
Yeah, there are a ton of different things that can be seen. It can be anything from lights in the sky to lights 6-7 feet off the ground, like disembodied voices above your heads that sound, for lack of a better word, like an ancient language, usually, as if people chattering about you, talking about you, the type of thing, the really and truly the type of thing that you would expect from like a schizophrenic, but this will happen in large groups. This will happen with multiple researchers with boots on the ground in a particular location where they are actually hearing this. So there's elements of this, although it could be neurologically manipulative, there's elements of this that everybody is partaking in the same display. And it's pretty wild scientifically. And like you said, the list of things that can be seen are really just, as studies go on, it seemingly is, as near as can be told, very reliant on the observer and the distance of the imagination of the observer. So these tricksters can interact in formats that basically are only limited by your own creativity.
Now, have some Bigfoot type creatures been spotted in the area? I mean, are we talking about, bipedal 7-foot creatures at times that have been witnessed there?
Absolutely. There's been, for lack of a better word, what was called, and you got to figure Terry just described it the best he could, and he said it was a large Shaquille O'Neal type individual that was very hairy, with moon boots on, had a shield over his face, very kind of flashy in the moon boot section, but, a large figure, hairy, yet wearing dazzling, out of this world attire. And this was in something that he thought might be an RV that was on his property, parked there, and come to find out that there was a lot of things that he interacted with that he thought may be military. And then, in my opinion, he probably went to the greatest lengths as far as trying to film whatever it was taking place. With even the crude technology that he had at the time, he did his very best and found some amazing stuff. And he was just trying to protect his family, and I think that's why he went to such lengths.
The other thing I want to touch on now, is it true that these craft that have been witnessed in the sky, the UFOs and strange lights, now have these been reported by the Native Americans as well for many years, going way back? As I understand it, this phenomena goes way back, but have these strange lights and craft been reported for hundreds of years?
This phenomena has gone on for 15 generations, the Ute tribe agrees on. More or less, I mean, that's a very long time. And that is, it is something that is accepted as just something that happens.
You hear of Native Americans. One area that I'm thinking of is, this is kind of tied in with the Phoenix Lights UFO incident in 1997. There's a Native American tribe that basically some of the researchers that were looking at the Phoenix Lights had talked to and said, yeah, we've been seeing these craft for hundreds of years. In fact, I think they referred to them as something like the Star People. And it's just interesting, that connection with the Native Americans, because there does seem to be some history there that they seem to have been seeing these things for perhaps hundreds, if not thousands of years. And that's kind of what I was getting at with that question. It seems to be somewhat the case there in that region as well.
Right. And it's a magical tradition, and the way with interaction as far as respect, it's very respectful, the interaction. Just because you see something doesn't mean you have to talk about it or describe it to anyone.
The other thing I want to talk about is these dogmen type creatures, because that seems to be pretty prevalent as well in the area. What are some of these dog type creatures that you've experienced or others have been experiencing in around this area?
There have been what could be considered dogman sightings from legitimate businessmen going to and from work late at night, other locals in the area driving around. One that is highlighted in the George Knapp and Colin Kelleher book is dogs, men with the heads of dogs on the side of the road smoking cigarettes, and everything in between that you can imagine. So there's quite a large variety.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's you mentioned reports of wolf type creatures, but now have you also witnessed some of these creatures that seem to be changing form in front of you?
I have, and it is nothing less than remarkable. It is like watching it's like watching an actual animal change shape before your eyes. And it is it's very wild. it's been witnessed, like I said, by a large, diverse group of people, not just a particular subset. And there's a legend, there's a tradition, there is a cultural curse that is historically there. So there's multiple things going on there. And then you have all these other interdimensional or intradimensional entities that are manipulating time and space in the same location. So it's really kind of a paranormal truck stop, or an intergalactic truck stop of sorts, or interdimensional, it would probably be the better term, where things from different places and different times and differences can come through where the veil is thinner.
Interesting. Yeah, it certainly seems to be a place where just about any type of paranormal activity can happen. You name it, and like I said, it seems to be some parallels there to the strange activity and high strangeness going on at Chestnut Ridge. Talk to me about a time when you were researching or investigating in the area, and perhaps one of your most scary moments, or moments when you were most alarmed while you were out there.
Those moments would be moments where I would be in close proximity with something I'd never seen before. And whenever that happens, and that is kind of why you're there, that's what you're after. But when that happens, there is a fear that takes over you.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about these vortex type things that seem to have an interdimensional aspect to them, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because it seems like on the and I believe it was on the Jeremy Corbell film, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, that they mentioned this, that they actually saw with their own eyes this strange kind of vortex and some sort of creature that they couldn't even hardly, maybe a humanoid type creature that came out of this and seemed to, emerge out and then go back in and kind of just disappear. You seem to have had some experiences with those as well. Can you touch on your experience and your research into those?
Sure. It was a night that the particular individual who was on security duty that night alerted a mutual source that they were going to the store, and that I basically had some time to take some shots, not be too worried. And I showed up, and it was pretty slow. And but then I saw a small light in a field start to manifest. And as it got brighter and brighter, I noticed that it looked like it was a figure coming through. And not only one figure, but another, like a cookie cutter figure behind it that was even brighter. And it was really strange. I did get a shot of it. It looks really wild, but it doesn't prove anything. And it's just one of those moments that you wonder, what is going on?
Yeah, absolutely. And it does seem to suggest that there is some sort of interdimensional aspect to what's going on there. And this is the kind of stuff, as you've already mentioned, there's all kinds of different paranormal activity going on there, and pretty much running the gamut of things you could see, perhaps. I wanted to touch on the security aspect of this, because you touched on that in the book as well. There still seems to be a high level of security in the area. I don't know if that's kind of subsided a little bit with the new property owner. But can you talk a little bit about the security in and around that Skinwalker Ranch region, and how they've interacted with people close to the ranch? Bystanders that are perhaps trying to get a view into the property. Maybe they get a little bit too close. But can you talk about that aspect to it? Because I thought that was interesting as well.
The actual security has been heightened. It's actually higher than ever before. And it is one of those instances exactly. If you get a little too close, trying to look a little too deep, you can quickly and swiftly be prosecuted. And it is, I understand, and yet, it is private property. So, yet at the same time, it's a location that a lot of people want to see. So, it's a double-edged sword.
Now, have people actually, I think you mentioned one story where a guy was actually picked up, questioned, taken to his house, and they seemed to know where he was located. That was, I think, the strange part of that. But can you briefly touch on that story from the book Uintah UFO Ranch?
Yes, this individual, exactly, was actually driven home and debriefed, for lack of a better word. And these type of stories, you hear them a lot. The strange thing is, I remember running into, back before there was a large automated electric gate like there is now and all the advanced security, there used to just be an old farm gate. And before that, there was no gate. And back when there was an old farm gate, I remember I would run into people from all over the country that were there at night. Hey, is this the Skinwalker Ranch? Or is this the old Sherman Ranch or the Uintah UFO Ranch? All kinds of names. And it's like, well, you're pretty close. Yeah, you're here. I'm like, you found it. And they're like, oh, yeah, we do this every once in a while. But the problem there is that it is a dangerous area. And there's the possibility for injury is highly multiplied exponentially because of the paranormal activity. And it's not safe in most cases in an all-night scenario where you don't know where you are, you don't know what you're doing, and it could be disorienting. So I understand that there's multiple facets to this.
So maybe if you could just touch briefly, as you go in to investigate an area, what are you taking with you? What are you packing in? What exactly are you most interested in trying to capture? Just a little bit about the equipment and how you go about doing that.
I think a lot of it really depends on what you're trying to capture, as you said. Equipment and the amount of researchers, the technology that you want or don't want, really is highly dependent upon that. So cheers to that. That's for sure. That's the kind of thing you want to do as far as, you don't know what juice to bring depending on what you're finding. But if you're just doing a random sweep, or if you're going into a location without seeing one before, something that has been on the forefront with our current research has been random number generation, and then that's something that the entities in intelligence can quickly identify with and mimic and interact with. But then when you step it up to quantum random number generation, it can get interesting. And you can do anything from have locations on a map nearby that are hot spots that you just use this quantum random number generator to find the location that you ask a question or go or whatever your intention is. And that seems to be having some colorful results. But this is a signature type thing with this phenomena. It can give you results, and then it can just take them right away. So it's hard to tell.
Yeah, so I mean, are you taking a lot of night vision video equipment, audio recorders, and that sort of thing, like maybe, say, a traditional paranormal investigator would go in with when they're investigating a location?
Absolutely. We always like to have multiple type of night quote vision, because night vision, some people could think of that as thermal, others as just, infrared. And so it's important to have various types of technology on the premises so that you can compare one to the other. Very often you can see one without the other, or if you can, things of that nature. So it's important to have everything you can have.
Now, you also mentioned that you've experienced battery drains and you've lost video footage. Is that something that occurs frequently as you're trying to obtain evidence while investigating in the area?
For some reason, that is very typical, and it's kind of a bummer because it's just more work. You have to have more batteries, be more prepared, and but it's very common, very, very common, and most every investigator that I've spoken to agrees with that.
Yeah, interesting. I'm a paranormal investigator myself. I have experienced that at multiple locations, where you're working with new batteries and suddenly you just get a battery drain, and we've had it happen with multiple pieces of equipment. So, yeah, I can understand it. It certainly is a strange thing. We've had cameras followed by audio recorder equipment or EMF meters, battery drains happen. And it certainly does make you wonder, is there some sort of presence, some sort of entity there that is drawing off them as a power source, or perhaps to actually help them manifest or to gain some strength or some power from doing that. And I just thought it was interesting that you had mentioned that in the book, that you've experienced it. The other question that I wanted to ask is there a place where you've captured evidence that you share with the public, or are you pretty kind of close hold with the some of the evidence that you've captured?
Yeah, I do try to share some evidence with the public. There's actually even a social media site, SWR on Facebook. It stands for Space Wolf Research. And it's, you can also check on, there's also podcasts that we do on the subject matter at heroparanormal.com. And you can also access that at heroparanormal.podbean.com, which is quick and easy if you don't want to watch a video and wait or use a lot of data. But yeah, there's some stuff out there, and there's more stuff out there every day. More people are catching stuff every day, and the interesting thing is that there is more interest in it, and it's going to be a very exciting journey to see where this ends up. I think the location holds some of the most mysterious keys to understanding our place on this planet and in this universe, and I'm excited.
Now, I also wanted to ask about Mr. Bigelow because he had researchers in the area. I know he sold the property. Do you think he's completely, for the most part, divested interest in the area, or do you think he still has some interest and still has researchers coming in?
I can't speak to that. So even if I could, I just can't. I just can't speak to that. I don't know. And so it's just not my place to say.
Okay. And with the new owner, this may kind of be along the same line, so perhaps maybe I won't ask it. I'm just kind of curious whether you think there's still a high level of government interest in the area, because there obviously was in the past.
Yes, the area is still an area of interest, and the overall, there is support in the area. It is an area of interest. I can't speak to what level, but absolutely.
Fascinating stuff. Certainly a place. Now, are people just kind of showing up there randomly more often now that they've learned of this place? Are you finding out that people are just kind of showing up? I think we've lost Ryan. I'm going to try and get him back here. Yeah, sorry we lost you. I'm not sure what happened there. You just dropped off.
No worries.
No, and I think we're kind of wrapping up here. I just wanted to touch on, now that it's become such an infamous place. You had the Jeremy Corbell film that came out. There's been other documentaries. You've had your books out on it. Are you finding that people more and more are trying to show up and get a glimpse of the strange activity going on there?
Yeah, there is more activity. There has been kind of a lull in activity. Before that, there was quite a bit of activity. So I'd say that it's kind of cyclical, and we're definitely coming into a time where there's more activity again, which can be dangerous. These are very small county roads where the very little traffic that's there, unless they have full capacity of the road, they can't really drive. And if people are parked along the road, that's going to mess things up. But yeah, there's more people coming up. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I can imagine that can be, like you said, problematic, especially if you have people that are skirting the lines of private property and making it more difficult, like people like yourself who are serious researchers and researching the area. Ryan, maybe if you could just share where people can find more information. I know you mentioned the podcast website. Maybe if you could mention that again, and wherever else people can find information about your research and the work you've done.
Yes, you can find, you can go to ryanpatrickburns.com. You can also go to heroparanormal.com for the podcast. A quick and easy way to download it is heroparanormal.podbean.com. And also check out the research project, which is spacewolfresearch.com, or SWR on Facebook, which stands for Space Wolf Research. Also, check out the books. The most recent one is Shapeshifter Territory. You can find it on Amazon. And the older ones are the Utah UFO Ranch is one I definitely recommend. So, yeah, they're out there too. Enjoy, and I'm happy to chat with you. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, Ryan. I really appreciate you spending the time with me, and I'm hoping to get out there at some point, at least, to kind of get a glimpse of something. I don't know, but it's certainly an interesting and fascinating place. Thank you for all the work you've done and still doing in researching the place. It's certainly, I think we have a lot to learn. We have so much to learn. There's so many mysteries out there that we still just don't understand, and really just at the tip of the iceberg on. And this certainly seems to be a place where we can continue to try and learn and discover the mysteries of this vast universe of ours. So once again, thank you for joining me, Ryan, and you have a great night.
You as well. Thanks so much, Curry. Take care. All the best.
Okay, so big thanks to Ryan for spending the time to talk with me tonight about a topic, again, I've been wanting to cover on the show for quite some time. It's such a mysterious and fascinating place, this place they call Skinwalker Ranch. Please make sure that you join me next episode when I'll have famous Bigfoot researcher Ron Moorhead joining me on the show. Ron has so many years of investigating the enigma that is Bigfoot, or as some like to say, Sasquatch. So I'm excited for that one as well. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into the show, and have a great night, everybody.